In the heart of Manhattan, where glass towers pierce the sky and fortunas are made before breakfast, there are people who believe their wealth makes them untouchable. This is a story about one such man who learned the hard way that appearances can be devastatingly deceiving, and the true power doesn't always announce itself with designer labels and luxury cars. What you read about here is a tale of arrogance, hidden identities, and a plot twist that will make you question everything you think you know about wealth and status. Before we begin, we'd love to know where you are watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories that keep you on the edge of your seat with unexpected turns, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next incredible story. Now, let us dive in. The autumn rain hammered against the windows of Carlyle Partners, one of Manhattan's most prestigious investment firms, located on the 47th floor of a building that overlooks Central Park. Inside the sleek conference room with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist decor, 23-year-old Maya Chen sat at the far end of the table, her fingers clasped tightly in her lap. She wore a simple gray blazer from a department store, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and carried a worn leather portfolio that had seen better days. She'd taken 3 buses to get here from her studio apartment in Queens, leaving at 5 in the morning to make sure she arrived on time for the 7 Amazonas meeting. Across from her sat Damien Ashford, 35, with perfectly styled blonde hair, a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than most people's cars, and a custom Tom Ford suit that fit him like it had been painted on. Which, in a sense, it had. Damien was the golden boy of Manhattan's financial elite, the youngest partner in the firm's history, and the heir to the Ashford Hotels empire, a global chain of luxury properties worth approximately $3 billion. His father, Richard Ashford, sat at the head of the table, a silver-haired man with the same calculating blue eyes as his son. Maya had been invited to this meeting by junior analyst Marcus Webb, who they discovered her working as a financial consultant for small businesses in Brooklyn. Marcus had seen something special in her economic models, the way she could predict market movements with uncanny accuracy. He'd convinced the partners to give her a chance to pitch an investment strategy. But from the moment Maya walked into the room, Damien had made his feelings clear. "I'm sorry," Damien said, leaning back in his leather chair with a smirk playing at his lips. "Did someone order lunch early? Because I'm pretty sure we were here for a business meeting, not to listen to someone who looks like they can barely afford their own lunch." A few of the junior associates around the table shifted uncomfortably, but no one dared contradict Damien Ashford. Maya's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "Mr. Ashford, if we could just look at the projections, the prepared projections," Damien interrupted, picking up her printed proposal and flipping through it with exaggerated disdain. "These are printed on regular paper, not even cardstock. Do you know what kind of people we do business with? They arrive in helicopters. They have assistants for their assistants. And you show up here with..." He held up her portfolio. "What is this, Prieter?" "It is leather," Maya said quietly, her face flushing. "And the quality of the portfolio doesn't change the quality of the analysis." Damien laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "Sweetheart, in this world, presentation is everything. You think anyone is going to trust their money to someone who can't even afford a decent outfit? I mean, look at you." He gestured dismissively at her clothing. "The blazer is from Macy's. Your shoes are scuffed. You probably took public transportation here, didn't you?" Maya's hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "I did. And I've been taking public transportation my whole life, while building businesses from the ground up, understanding markets from street level, not from a penthouse." The perspectives, Damien cut her off, standing now unbuttoning a suit jacket, "is worthless here. This is high finance. This is about understanding the people at the top, not the people at the bottom scraping by. My father built his empire by catering to the wealthy, by understanding what luxury means. You wouldn't last one day in our world." Richard Ashford cleared his throat. "Damien, perhaps we should at least, Dad, with all due respect, this is a waste of our time." Damien walked around the table until he stood beside Maya. "Let me guess, you went to some state school. Took out student loans you waste still paying off. Worked 3 jobs just to make rent on some studio apartment with a plot in a bathroom the size of a closet. Maya stood up, gathering her papers with as much dignity as she could muster. Each of his words had landed like a physical blow because they were all true. She had gone to a state school, City College of New York, on scholarship and loans. She did work multiple jobs. Her apartment in Queens was exactly as he did describe. I came here because Marcus thought my work had merit, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But clearly, I made a mistake. The only mistake, Damien said, his voice dripping with condescension, was Marcus thinking someone like you could ever operate at our level. Here is some free advice, since you clearly can't afford to pay for any, say in your lane. Work with the mama and pop shops in whatever bowl you crawled out of. Leave the real money to people who understand it. People who were born to it. Maya's eyes glistened with unshid tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. She walked toward the door, each step measured and controlled. As she reached for the handle, Damien called out one last thing. Oh, and sweetheart. Next time you want to play with the big boys, at least buy a decent handbag. That thing looks like you found it at a thrift store. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Maya stood in the marble hallway for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to steady herself. The tears she had held back now streamed down her face. She had worked so hard, prepared so thoroughly, and it had all been dismissed because of her appearance, her background, her lack of obvious wealth. She walked to the elevator, loaded down 47 floors, and stepped out into the rainy New York morning. She didn't have an umbrella, so she just walked, letting the rain mix with her tears. Back in the conference room, Marcus Webb was furious. That was completely uncalled for, Damien. Her analysis was brilliant. She predicted the microchip shortage 6 months before it happened. She is nobody, Damien said flatly. And this firm deals with somebodies. Meeting adjourned. 3 weeks later, Damien was having lunch at Le Bernardin, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, with his father and several potential investors from Dubai. He was in his element, discussing his latest acquisition, a boutique hotel chain in the Maldives that would add another 100 million to the Ashford portfolio. Life was good. Life was perfect, actually. His phone buzzed. A text from his secretary. Emergency. Call immediately. Damien excused himself from the table and stepped outside onto the street, dialing his office. This better be important, Jennifer. Sir, you need to come back to the office right now. The Montclair Group just pulled out of the partnership. They were taking their $2 billion investment to a competitor. Damien's blood ran cold. The Montclair Group was the cornerstone of his latest venture, a massive real estate development in Dubai. Without their investment, the entire project would collapse. What? Why? We had to sign contracts. They said they found a better opportunity with more promising leadership. Sir, there is more. The Wellington Fund called. They were also reconsidering their position. And am getting calls from 3 other major partners. Something is happening. Over the next 2 days, Damien watched his carefully constructed empire begin to crumble. One by one, major investors were pulling out, citing vague reasons about strategic realignments and better opportunities elsewhere. By Friday, he'd lost over $5 billion in committed capital. His father was furious, the board was demanding answers, and Damien couldn't figure out what was happening. This wasn't a normal market movement. This was coordinated. That evening, Damien was at his penthouse in Tribeca, 3,000 square feet of luxury overlooking the Hudson River, trying to make sense of the financial report spread across his dining table, when his phone rang. A known number. Mr. Ashford, a woman's voice, professional and cool. This is Catherine Mills from Titan Capital Management. I am calling on behalf of our CEO, who would like to invite you to a meeting tomorrow at Nina Amazonas. The address is 150 Greenwich Street, Titan Capital. Damien searched his memory. He had never heard of them. Who is your CEO? All will be explained at the meeting, Mr. Ashford. I strongly suggest you attend. Your investors are curious about what we have to say. The line went dead. The next morning, Damien arrived at 150 Greenwich Street, a gleaming tower in the financial district. The lobby alone screamed money, real money, the kind that didn't need to show off because everyone already knew it was there. He was escorted by security to the 60th floor, an office that made his own look like a closet, and there, behind a massive desk of dark wood, sat Maya Chen. But this wasn't the Maya he humiliated 3 weeks ago. This Maya wore a perfectly tailored Armani suit in navy blue. Her hair was styled elegantly. She wore subtle but expensive jewelry, and the confidence in her eyes was unmistakable. On the wall behind her hung a portrait of an elderly Asian man with kind eyes. Damien stood frozen in the doorway. "What is this?" Maya gestured to the chair across from her. "Please, sit down, Mr. Ashford. We have a lot to discuss," he said, his mind racing. What are you doing here?" "This is my office," Maya said simply. "I am the CEO and majority owner of Titan Capital Management. We manage approximately $47 billion in assets globally. We were also the controlling shareholder in Montclair Group, Wellington Fund, and about 6 other investment firms that have recently decided to pull their capital from your ventures." Damien felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "That is impossible. You couldn't even afford a decent outfit," Maya finished for him, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Yes, I remember. Let me tell you a story, Mr. Ashford. The man in the portrait behind me is Chen Wei, my grandfather. In 1968, he arrived in San Francisco with $40 in his pocket and a dream. He worked 3 jobs, saved every penny, and invested in real estate when it was cheap. By 1980, he owned 12 buildings in Chinatown. By 1990, he expanded to tech startups in Silicon Valley. By 2000, he built an empire worth billions. He was brilliant, hardworking, and humble. He never forgot where he came from." She stood, walking to the window that overlooked the Manhattan skyline. "My grandfather died when I was 15. He left everything to my mother, who ran the business until 3 years ago, when she passed from cancer. I inherited the entire empire when I was 20. $47 billion. More than your family's net worth by a factor of 15. Damien asked the facet Gonpal. "But you won't. Why were you? Why was I taking buses from Queens? Why was I wearing cheap clothes? Why was I meeting with small business owners?" Maya turned to face him. "Because my grandfather taught me something important," he said. "Never forget the streets that built you. After my mother died, I was drowning in grief and privilege. I had more money than I could ever spend, but I lost touch with reality. So I decided to do something radical. I moved to Queens under my mother's maiden name, Chen, instead of using our family name, Chen. I wore simple clothes, took public transportation, and worked as a financial consultant for small businesses. I wanted to understand the economy from the ground up, not from a penthouse." She walked back to her desk, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "Marcus had found me during the team. He saw my work and thought it had merit. He was right. The presentation I was going to give you, it outlined an investment strategy that was since generated $2.3 billion in returns. But you never got to see it because you were too busy mocking my shoes." Damien swallowed hard. "I didn't know. Of course you didn't know," Maya said, her voice sharp now. "That was the point. You judged me entirely on my appearance. You decided I was worthless because I didn't arrive in a helicopter to carry a designer handbag. You mocked me for being poor when I was sitting on an empire that could buy your family as the hotel's 20 teams over." She sat down, folding her hands on the desk. "Here is what is going to happen, Mr. Ashford. Every investor you've lost, I control them, directly or indirectly. I have the power to make or break your business ventures. That $5 billion in capital that walked away, that was me sending a message. This is blackmail," Damien said, trying to find his footing, his confidence. "You contagious. I can," Maya interrupted. "And I have. But I didn't bring you here to destroy you, Damien. I brought you here to teach you something my grandfather taught me. Real wealth isn't about what you wear or how you arrive. It is about what you build, who you help, and the legacy you leave behind. You mocked me for taking the bush, but I learned more about the city's economy from those bus reads than you ever learned from the back seat of your Mercedes. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. This is a proposal. Titan Capital will reinvest in your Dubai project. We'll also provide an additional $3 billion in capital for expansion. In return, I want 20% equity in Ashford Hotels and a seat on your board. More importantly, I want you to implement a new program, scholarships for students from low-income backgrounds. You want to enter hospitality management, internships with real opportunities, and community investment in every city where you operate. Damien stared at the folder, his hands shaking slightly as he opened it. The terms were more than generous, they were incredible. With this capital and Titan's backing, he could expand beyond his wildest dreams. But it would mean admitting he was wrong. It would mean swallowing his pride. Why? He asked finally. Why are you doing this? After what I said to you? Maya leaned back in her chair. Because my grandfather believed in second chances. He believed that people could learn and grow. And because, despite your arrogance and your cruelty that day, Marco showed me your other work. When you were not busy being a privileged joke, you were actually good at what you do. You have vision. You just need humility to go with it. She stood, extending her hand. So what do you say, Mr. Ashford? Are you willing to learn? Or would you prefer to watch your empire crumble because you were too proud to accept help from someone you once deemed unworthy? Damien sat there for a long moment, the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him. He thought about that morning 3 weeks ago, about the look on Maya's face as he tore her down, about his certainty that he was better than her simply because of his background. He'd been so wrong, so completely and utterly wrong. He stood and shook her hand. I accept your terms. And I apologize. Truly, what I said to you that day was unforgivable. It was, Maya agreed. But forgiveness isn't about whether something is forgivable. It is about choosing to move forward despite the hurt. My grandfather forgave the people who discriminated against him when he first came to this country. He forgave them, and then he outworked them, taught them, and outlasted them. That is what real power looks like. Over the next 6 months, Damien underwent a transformation. With Maya's guidance and Titan Capital's backing, Ashford Hotels didn't just recover, it thrived. But more importantly, Damien changed. He implemented every program Maya had proposed. He started taking the subway to work once a week, not as a publicity stunt, but to remind himself of what he'd forgotten. He mentored students from City College, the same school Maya had attended. He listened more and spoke less. One evening, almost a year after their first meeting, Damien and Maya were having dinner at a small Thai restaurant in Queens, not far from the studio apartment where Maya had lived during her year of self-imposed humility. You know what the craziest part is? Damien said, setting down his chopsticks. I thought I understood business. I thought I understood wealth. But I was just playing a role they inherited. You actually built something from understanding, from experience. Even after inheriting your grandfather's empire, you went back to the beginning to understand it better. Maya smiled. My grandfather used to say, a tree with strong roots can weather any storm, but a tree that only grows upward will fall at the first strong wind. You were all growth, no roots. Now you're building both. Can I ask you something? Damien said, that day, when I was humiliating you in that conference room, you could have ended it with a single sentence. You could have told me who you were. Why didn't you? Maya was quiet for a moment, considering, because I wanted to see if anyone would value my ideas regardless of my appearance. Marcos did. The others, including you, didn't. They told me everything I needed to know about who deserved my business and who didn't. Also, she added with a slight smile, there was a part of me that knew someday, somehow, you'd learn the truth. And I wanted that lesson to land with full force. Damien laughed, shaking his head. Well, it certainly did. I haven't been able to look at designer labels the same way since. Last week, I saw a guy in the subway reading financial reports that were more sophisticated than anything I've seen from my top analysts. He was wearing a janitor's uniform. Made me wonder what other brilliance I've been missing because I was too busy judging people as outsides. That is growth, Maya said. Real growth. 2 years later, Ashford hotels had tripled in value. The scholarship and internship programs had changed hundreds of lives. And Damien had become known not just as a successful businessman, but as someone who genuinely cared about creating opportunities for others. He still made mistakes, still had moments of arrogance, but now he caught himself. Now he remembered. On a crisp October morning, Damien stood at the grave of Chen Wei in a cemetery in San Francisco. Maya stood beside him. They did just come from opening the first Chen Wei Center for Economic Empowerment, a building in the Tenderloin district that would provide free financial education and business mentoring to low-income residents. I never got to meet him, Damien said, looking at the simple headstone. But I wish I had. He would have liked you, Maya said, eventually. After you learned your lesson. Damien smiled. Do you think you've learned it, really? Maya looked at him thoughtfully. Learning isn't a destination, Damien. It's a journey. My grandfather spent his whole life learning, growing, changing. The moment you think you've learned everything is the moment you stop growing. Then I hope I never stop, Damien said. As they walked back to the car, a young woman in a food service uniform stopped them. Excuse me, are you Maya Chen? From Titan Capital. I am, Maya said. The young woman's eyes filled with tears. I just wanted to say thank you. I got one of your scholarships. I am studying business at Senado Federal State, and I am the first person in my family to go to college. You changed my life, Maya hugged her, and Damien watched, understanding finally crystallizing in his mind. This was what wealth was really for, not for showing off, not for feeling superior, but for opening doors that had been closed, for creating opportunities where none existed, for changing lives. That night, on the flight back to New York, Damien looked out the window at the clouds below and thought about the day 2 years ago when he'd mocked a young woman for her cheap blazer and scuffed shoes. He thought about how close he'd come to missing one of the most important lessons of his life. And he thought about how that young woman, with all her billions hidden beneath department store clothing, had shown him what real power looked like. It wasn't about the watch on your wrist or the car you drove. It wasn't about where you lived or how you dressed. Real power was about what you built, who you lifted up, and whether you had the courage to admit when you were wrong and the strength to change. Maya was right. Learning wasn't a destination. It was a journey. And Damien had finally begun his. The plane cut through the night sky, carrying to people who they started as adversaries and become partners, carrying the legacy of an immigrant, who they built an empire not just of wealth, but of wisdom, carrying forward the lesson that Maya's grandfather had learned long ago and that Damien was learning. The true greatness lies not in looking down on others, but in lifting them up, not in showing off what you have, but in sharing what you've been given. And sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one you did never expect, wearing simple clothes and carrying a worn leather portfolio, waiting patiently for you to see past your own arrogance to the truth that has been standing right in front of you all along.